So think about some other context. So will we actually get tied to that? So like with regards to school, we might say. With an example of them within school where we have selfish people who are expecting you to live the way that they want you to live. Teachers. How does that happen?
Would it be like that? Get a job.
What's that?
Getting a job.
You want me to get a job?
No.
No way.
The teachers want us students to be successful, go to college, and get a job.
Oh. What's wrong with that? Be successful, go to college, get a job.
Maybe you don't want to get a job, but we have other plans.
What if I want to get a job? No job. So what if you want to get a job? Okay. But also those first two, by the way. Go to college, get a job, be happy. I want you guys to be happy, just like us. How many times do you see people dragging their asses into work to teach? You know, they say things like, don't talk to me until I have my coffee.
Yeah.
By the way, stay off of drugs. Where's my coffee? I need my coffee before I start teaching. It's bad to get addicted to chemicals. That's so bad. I can't teach yet. I don't have the proper combination of chemicals in my body. Anyway, do what I do. This is why I tell you I'm not a role model. At least I can be honest about it. So it's as he says, selfishness isn't living as one wishes to live. It's asking others to live as one wishes to live. And, I'm getting in trouble again. I'm going to bring it up again, why not? So for example, the person I was just talking about, at one point this person asked the group what we thought about the double lunch thing. And all the teachers that were in the room all kind of said the same thing. We all shrugged our shoulders and said, it doesn't affect us. It's up to the students. And this person was passionate and said, but don't you think that that it's about safety? And all of us shrugged our shoulders and said, not really. And this person then went on to say, and I wasn't in the room when this happened, I was told about this afterwards. The person went on to say that it's kind of like parenting. And you know, as a parent, and you have a child who wants to do something like that, touch a hot stove, it's up to us to stop them from touching the hot stove. Because the child doesn't know what's good for them. And so apparently somebody in the room was asking, are you saying that the students don't know what's good for them? And she said, yes. That the students don't even realize how much danger they're in by being out at lunch. That they're in this, and yeah, so she explains that so this person goes on to explain, apparently, that you guys are in terrible danger, and you're just too childish to know it. So it's up to the teachers to step in and vote for the double lunch so that we can save you from yourselves.
They're not taking care of 2 kids.
It sounds like it. I should have asked you, do you have twins? No. Yeah. One of them who's upside down?
Taking care of twins.
Yeah, taking care of twins. And you know, we got one over here that's got, one's upside down with a beanie for a diaper. You know? but we're doing what we can, you know? And I don't tell you that as a way of inciting you. Please understand that. I tell you that because that type of thinking that some of y'all just recoiled against audibly is exactly the kind of thinking that goes into a lot of decisions like this. You think about what it is to make the decision for somebody else on somebody else's behalf. Oh, I have to make this decision for you because you're too weak to make this decision for you. Think about, like, for example, the desire to limit speech. I have to limit speech because, first off, I understand what the effects of these things are. If you're against limiting speech, then you just don't understand the effects of it. And even though the masses of people will be in favor of not limiting speech, there will be some who will come along and say, well, we have to protect people from themselves. And that's a common trope that you hear. We have to protect people from themselves. We have to make these decisions on behalf of everybody else because other people, you just don't understand the implications of what's going on. But I do. Because I'm very wise, of course, I'm very smart, and of course the opposite thereof is you're not wise and you're not smart. And it also kind of betrays this idea of, well, what if you're not wise? What if you're not smart? Does that therefore mean that you shouldn't be allowed to make decisions for yourself? I'm thinking about in New York, 5 years ago, I guess it was now, I think it was, the governor over there, not the guy who was creating the guy, it was a different person. No, I'm sorry, the mayor of the city, in Bloomberg. He decided that they were going to pass a city ordinance banning sodas that were over a certain size, which means that you would not have been allowed to go in and get a big gulp at 7-Eleven. The idea was that soda was too big for you to buy. Yes, sir. But the mayor's idea was, why do you have to ban those sodas? Because too many people are drinking them. They're not good for you. But you see that there's an idea of, and people would nod and go, that's true. Oh, I think I might know what you're talking about. In Los Angeles, they banned the construction of fast food restaurants in areas. And those areas overwhelmingly, well not over, I think they're almost exclusively, were low-income neighborhoods. So now, as I tell you, they won't issue permits to build like the McDonald's in South Los Angeles and places in Echo Park and all that. Why? Because the people over there were eating too much of it. So they get to make the decision for everybody else, you shouldn't be eating this, so therefore we're going to ban it. Why? Well, it's bad for you. Is it bad for you? Yeah. Well, does it lead to a lot of nutrition, a lot of health problems down the road? Of course it does. But there's a question that just because it does that, does that mean that therefore you should stop people from making their own decisions? Because if you say, well, yeah, because whatever decisions you make affect everybody else, I would ask you to give me an example of a decision you make personally that does not affect anybody else, if we're going to apply it that way. Every bag of chip you eat affects other people, because if you eat a bunch of chips, then you have bad health, and if you're poor health, then that's going to cause you to be in the hospital, which is going to tax our healthcare system. And especially if we're looking at now you have to have healthcare, which means that you have to be in the system, so whatever decisions you make affect everybody else, because if you use too much care, then other people don't have it, it becomes more expensive. So yeah, therefore we shouldn't allow you to eat the things that you want to eat. We all have a say over that. That's the problem. That's part of the problem when you collectivize everything. When you collectivize everything, then that means that everybody rightfully has a say over what you do and what you don't do. When you see people who shout about liberty and stuff like that, yeah, it can be a trope. You can sit there and go, yeah, America. But also understand that there is something real that goes on there. Essentially, you can think like the bigger the state, the smaller the citizen. The bigger the citizen, the smaller the state. Rights kind of flow in this way. And so when we sit there and say, well, yeah, we should protect people from themselves, then all of that stuff starts to make sense. And that means that you can't buy chips if you're under 18, because you can't possibly, which by the way is an ordinance somewhere in San Francisco. Because you guys are young, you guys don't understand how that stuff works. We have to protect you from yourself. In New York, you can't buy certain sizes of soda. In Los Angeles, you can't open up a fast food restaurant in certain places. And so at some point, how far that goes is a challenge. Now again, we don't want to go. It's difficult also to kind of go in too far in the opposite direction, because, like for example, should we allow people to use weed?
Yeah.
Okay. That was quick. Okay. And by the way, you notice how we ask those kinds of questions. It's a weird way to ask the question. Should we allow you to? Not should the state stop you from doing it. In other words, not does the state have a right to stop you from using it. We oftentimes frame it in the opposite way. Do you have a right to do it? That's a really weird thing, if you really conceptualize it. It kind of presupposes that the state is the one who gives you your rights and allows you to do things, rather than the other way around. The people are the ones who give the state powers to do things. But in any event, why?
Because it's like, you know if it's good or bad for you.
I don't.
Well,
You said me. You're talking about me again.
consumers know if it's bad or good.
Okay. How does weed work?
You consume it.
No, that's how you use it. I'm asking what are the predictable effects on the neuroreceptors from using cannabis?
Slows it down. Makes you, I don't know.
But you said the consumers know. But you're a consumer, you don't know. Okay. And I think you're going to find out, so there's an example like, you guys ever heard of kratom before?
What?
Kratom.
No.
Yeah, kratom, K-R-A-T-O-M. Kratom sometimes if you guys might not ever see it. If you ever see me drinking like a green liquid in here, and some people ask me like, what is that? And people think it's like a protein powder or something like that. No, not that at all. I understand why you think that, but protein powder? No, it's a pain reliever. Quite the opposite. You can't buy it in San Diego. It's banned. It's against the law to buy it in San Diego. But you can buy it in the regions around. So you can buy it in National City. You just can't buy it in San Diego City. The reason for it is because it's not FDA approved. It's interesting, right? We should ban substances that aren't FDA approved. That would have made the last year and a half a very difficult time for us, huh?
Yeah.
But this is the explanation for why it's banned. If you take too much of it, you overdose on it, and the way that you have to kind of measure it out. So in other words, you have to kind of experiment to see what works for you and what doesn't. If you overdose on it, there are really horrendous consequences. I've overdosed on it a few times, and every time, yeah, you get a tummy ache. Yeah, when you overdose on it, you get a tummy ache. And I have sat there on many occasions going, tummy ache. And I've reported this to friends. I've said, I have tummy ache. And then you have tummy ache for a few hours, and then a couple hours, and it goes away. Those are the side effects that you have from it. But it's non-habit forming, and it's also been in some areas it's classified as a narcotic because in some cases it can give some people a sense of euphoria. In other words, it can make people lighter mood and happy. It doesn't do that for me. For me, it just gets rid of pain. I have a friend who told me, "Hi, it chilled me out. He reported me a sense of euphoria." He said, "It's great, man," because I gave him some. But apparently he also smoked some weed when he drank it. I'm like, okay, so those two things together, yeah, I can see this. But those are the reasons that created it, because it's not FDA approved. You can buy it in powder form, which means you have to. It's not like standardized in a pill. You can buy pills of it. I'm like capsules of it and all that. But if you guys ever see me drinking it, that's what I'm drinking. It's a pinwheel. I buy it here in National City, actually. But that's why it's banned, because it's not good for you. And so they make that decision based off of the state. I think that you're going to have a hard time discovering almost any decision that you make in life that does not impact other people. And if we use that as the criteria, then I think you're going to have a hard time. However, having said that, do you want people running around on heroin? I mean, you might say, like, well, because every decision affects other people, we're going to be very narrow in how we describe that. Drunk driving isn't really an issue unless you hit somebody, right? So maybe drunk driving shouldn't be illegal, except in the case of when you cause a traffic accident. Otherwise, you're not affecting anybody else. You know? Shooting guns is legal as long as you don't shoot a person, right? So maybe drunk driving should be illegal as long as you don't hit another person. Shooting heroin, no problem, as long as you don't kill anybody else in the process. So you can see that there's some very wide extremes, and a very difficult process is figuring out somewhere in between where that line is. And I just explained it to you guys. There are some people who think that we have to do a double lunch because we have to protect you from yourselves. That's not a common view, by the way. It's not a common view. But then but some of you already are parents, apparently. You know, with your flower babies. So some of you are having to make those decisions right now. At what point do you let a child, when you guys have kids, at what point do you let your kids experiment and find out for themselves? At what point do you, and even as you are right now, at what point do you want your parents and your teachers to go, to be more removed from your lives and letting you make these decisions that could be positive or negative for you in high school? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, obviously I struggle with it with you guys because I don't stand above you and tell you, come on, get your work done. You know? I also sit here and talk to you for a long time, and one of the reasons I sit here and talk to you for so long is because it does give you extra time to write if you're writing things down. But at what point should I be more more forceful with getting stuff done? Should I enforce the no cell phones thing? Should I tell you guys, no, only one person at a time to go to the bathroom, you must have the pass, and enforce all those things? There's reasons I don't do those things, because as seniors, it's a good thing, I think, for you to find out for yourself who you are. Are you the person who can behave responsibly? Or are you the person who has to have someone standing above you, forcing you to do things? Because I would suggest to you that if standing above you and forcing you to do things made you a better student, or in the case of like moral behavior made you a better person, or any of that, you have a lot of other areas in your life where you've had practice for that. I'm sure you have lots of teachers who stand above you and go, hey, put your phone away, do this. One person about, if that worked, it would carry over into this class, wouldn't it? In other words, that would just be your behavior pattern. So if it doesn't carry over into the behavior pattern, I reject the idea that therefore I'm making you worse students, because like, well, you have to enforce these things. It's been enforced on you for 12 years by dozens of teachers and by administrative staffs and all that stuff. And if it didn't take, well, then it'd be a good idea for you to find out today that that didn't take, rather than find out a year from now, or 2 years from now, 10 years from now, or whatever. You know, in other words, when you give those opportunities. So it's a tough line, man. You know, it's a tough line. At what point is it selfishness? At what point is it just kind of individualism? But I think you're going to find, like, there are, I'll leave it at that. Others will be here for that. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?